My name is Jasmine Woodard with NACE, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Empowering Job Seekers with Disabilities. We encourage you to actively participate in the chat, and please post your questions in the Q&A. It is my pleasure to introduce Matt Burnt, Head of the Job Search Academy with Indeed. Take it away, Matt.
Jasmine, thank you so much. Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to Empowering Job Seekers with Disabilities. This is a conversation for you, career coaches, career counselors, and other career services professionals to help you better understand the variety of challenges job seekers with disabilities experience as they pursue jobs and internships and seek to enter the workforce, along with some other of their motivators as they begin their careers. As Jasmine said, my name's Matt Burnt. I love seeing all of the names popping into the webinar chat right now. It's wonderful to see you all here. I'm the head of Indeed's Job Search Academy, and I will be facilitating today's conversation. Indeed and the Gregory Feriebach Center at Eskenazi Health are the co-sponsors of this NACE Insights and Solutions webinar. And this webinar is taking place because Larry Markle with Eskenazi Health and I were sitting next to each other when they received their award last year at the NACE conference. And we had an idea, and it resulted in this program. So Larry, thank you for your partnership. And thank you for the partnership of our first panelist, Dr. David Parker. David is a program manager for research, educational outreach, and communications with the Gregory Feriebach Center at Eskenazi Health. David, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Matt. Thank you.
Wonderful. Along with David is Michelle Alford Williams, the Senior Director for Next Gen Initiatives with Disability In. Michelle, it's great to have you here.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I am well. We learned before we came on air that you and I share so many things in common, including being the youngest kid in large families. Joining us also is Donna Bungard. Donna is a colleague of mine here at Indeed. She is the Director of Accessibility for Indeed. And finally, Alex Herrera, a 2024 Notre Dame graduate and a graduate of the Feriebach Center's internship program for college students with physical disabilities. He's currently a financial analyst in the power and automotive industry. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be here.
Look, thank you all for being here. Now, we're going to discuss 3 topics over the next 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to open up the conversation to your questions. So bring them in the Q&A section. And of course, you can throw them into chat as well. We have staff working behind the scenes to triage their questions. They might answer some along the way. It's staff from Eskenazi Health, from Indeed, and from Disability In. So you have a lot of resources at your disposal. And at the end, they're going to bring as many questions as they can to us, to the panel, so that we can answer them and turn this into an even broader conversation. I'd also like to thank our friends from the American Sign Language interpreters and the caption providers from Partners Interpreting. They're helping us make this webinar more accessible to everyone. Now, our panel includes subject matter experts on accessibility, advocates for workers with disabilities, and multiple of us with physical and/or cognitive disabilities. So we bring a lot of personal experience as well as experience working on behalf of workers with disabilities and their pursuit of better work. We're going to discuss these 3 primary topics using data insights from Indeed's 2024 Workforce Insights Report to illustrate the experiences and motivations of workers with disabilities and some of the barriers they encounter in pursuit of their careers. So let's dig in, and we're going to start off with some data insights talking about experiences. When Indeed polled the U.S. workforce for our 2024 Workforce Insights Report, 377 people, or 6% of the total survey respondents, identified themselves as having a disability requiring accommodations. These experiences of these survey respondents who reported disability accommodations and those who did not differ in a number of ways. Across the board, workers with disabilities were less likely to report working in full-time occupations and more likely to be working part-time or self-employed. In addition, 50% of workers with disabilities indicated that their work caused them a great amount of stress. And 48% said they felt burned out by their work, both of which were higher than workers without disabilities. Now, it's encouraging, though, to see that 68% of workers with disabilities said they felt optimistic about their job prospects in 2024, which is about the same as the general workforce. Now, I'm going to share, you are going to be able to get all of these slides, so don't worry about trying to screen capture all of those data points. We're going to give them to you afterwards. Okay, that's a lot of question, or a lot of data, excuse me. And that data begs really two primary questions. So panel, do you see this same optimism today? The survey was a year ago among students with disabilities getting ready to enter the workforce. And how do you advise students on avoiding the stress and the burnout at work that can, as they get ready to take their first jobs? Michelle, you work with next gen initiatives at Disability. Can I come to you first in responding to these two questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. So yes, the students that we work with here at Disability, and we have about 438 in this year's class. We have about 1,500 alumni that we also work with, and we are seeing that same theme about burnout on their first job, understanding how to incorporate their disability. A lot of that is that disability incorporation. How do I ask for reasonable accommodations? Do I disclose? Don't I disclose? Especially right now, there's a lot of angst around disclosure. So we provide them some resources, especially JAM, which is Job Accommodation Network, my favorite website in the world, that has lots of good information for everybody to use. We do see that they're also their first year, their second year, because we have alumni who come back and they're like, okay, I did my first year in the corporate America, but I'm not understanding, which is one of the reasons why our program, what we do is we actually set up mentors. So ours is a mentoring program. So they're actually mentored by people in corporate America who have lived that experience. So it helps them to navigate that a little bit. But we're seeing that a lot around our students, about the anxiety about the first job, anxiety about keeping the job, anxiety about disclosure. But then we're also seeing that once they get the job, they're very happy with their positions. They're happy with what they're doing and things like that.
You know, it is tremendous to hear that, to see the resources and the support that you all are providing. That transition into your first job is tough. We actually just did a webinar earlier, well, it was last week, on thriving in a multi-generational workplace. And it was really focused on how do you find your way, particularly in those early years. Alex, you have been finding your way in these early years of your career. When you look at that data, what comes to mind in terms of your own experience and how you might advise fellow students or recent graduates on that transition into the workplace?
Yes, Matt. So when I was looking for a job, I was aware that going through the recruiting process with a disability was going to present additional challenges, especially when it comes to how to successfully disclose disability, in my case, legal blindness, throughout the interview process and the recruiting process. But overall, I agree with your data. I had a positive outlook, and I knew that I had the resources to be successful throughout the process, and thankfully I was. And I've been in my role for 10 months now, and I think I can address the question about anxiety and burnout. I think a lot of anxiety comes through not knowing how you are going to perform or how people might perceive uh, some of your difficulties. And in my experience, the best thing that I've done is just to get close with my team. At the end of the day, my team has my best interest in mind, and they want me to succeed. And they are not magicians, so they cannot guess the things that I need or require when it comes to accommodations or things that it's going to be making my work more efficient. So just by being open with my team, communicating how everything is going, if I feel like I have additional tasks that it might be too much on my platter, or maybe tell them some of the things they can do throughout presentations, like verbalizing. If I'm open with them and they understand my needs and we're able to collaborate together, that greatly decreases the anxiety and the burnout because I don't feel like I'm carrying everything on my own. I know that my team understands, and by being open with them, that has greatly helped me with decreasing anxiety and burnout, especially in my first job where everything seems new. Being able to be open has really helped.
That is, oh, a good team is so important. And it is just wonderful to see the thumbs ups and the hearts that are floating across the reaction screen. I love the fact that career services folks are great when it comes to all of the different reactions and letting us know where they are. So, Alex, I do want to ask you, Michelle was talking about the importance and the benefit of mentors. Have you been able to develop mentor relationships that you can lean into in addition to your strong team?
Yes, so importance of mentorship is it's really important, and I feel like I've had great mentors throughout college, but also new mentors uh, here at my company. And we actually have a group mentorship program, and we meet about once every 2 months. And it's people throughout different areas of the company, and we are able, in a safe environment, to share some of the things that work and some of the things that could work better. And we give each other feedback. And I've also been open about the fact that I have a visual impairment and how I am navigating that uh, throughout the first months of my career. And just having a mentor and having someone that has more experience and that they can give me tips and resources to feel comfortable, confident, and to maximize my chances of success has been a great stepping stone, honestly. And the biggest thing is that I don't feel like I'm alone. Um, I think that that's the biggest thing,
That's
that I have knowledge. I have people with knowledge that are guiding me, and that makes me comfortable and confident that I'm making the right decisions.
David, you have to be sitting there beaming with pride right now, knowing that Alex is a graduate of your internship program. You work with a lot of wonderful students like Alex. What's some of the advice that you are offering, and what are some of your responses to the data that we've seen?
We're so proud to be represented by Alex and so many other remarkable young people like him. Um, there's a lot of overlap in what I'm hearing from Alex and Michelle and what we do at the Gregory S. Ferrybox Center. We provide paid internships, just for a little context briefly, to college students across the Midwest with physical disabilities. These are often individuals with hearing, visual, mobility impairments. So unlike the majority of students with disabilities, many of our interns have very apparent disabilities. So it's not a matter of should I disclose or when should I disclose. It's a matter of how do I go about doing that, as Alex talked about. And we certainly recommend career professionals on campus, like we do at the Ferry Box Center, like Michelle's organization does. We encourage you to help students with disabilities really think through in advance that whole disclosure process. We invite you to encourage students, like Alex has described, to not go into a lot of great detail. There's not a real need to do that. The focus isn't really on your disability per se. You don't have to give a big background on that. It's more about, how does your disability impact what you need to do to be successful? So indeed, what kind of accommodations might you need? As Alex described too, the work experience that we can help students in college get when they have disabilities equips them with knowledge and confidence and experience, self-determination really, that when they're applying for that full-time position, they're not just talking hypotheticals, and they have the confidence and the experience to say, look, this is how I was accommodated in my internship. As the supervisor wrote in her recommendation letter, my needs are pretty minimal and rather easily and inexpensively met too. So again, we really do promote work experience in the college years so that students with disabilities can try out what they need to be successful in the workplace. And then, as we're seeing Alex do today, speak about it very confidently and kind of put the employer at ease, if you will, and help the team understand, not only am I going to bring my talents, my intelligence, my training, my preparation to the work experience, but also the additional insights and perspectives I have based on my disability that might bring some really unique perspectives to the workspace as well.
Great advice, great experience. Donna, I'm going to drag you into the conversation here shortly, but I want to do that as we move into our next topic, motivations. Okay. 27% of the workers with disabilities that we surveyed indicated that they would be actively looking for work in the next 6 months. Now, that was 8% higher than the population without disabilities, perhaps an indication that they're more proactive in getting ready for their job search. Now, when asked what they typically look for when they're searching for a job, the top two priorities, frankly, for all job seekers were higher pay and better benefits. Workers with disabilities were more likely to rate benefits as a top motivator, in addition to seeking a better company culture and a shorter commute. When we asked about what they looked for when researching companies as part of a job search, the results offered some deeper insights. Salary and benefits were top factors for all job seekers. However, employee happiness, especially workload, were areas that were a bit more important for job seekers with disabilities as they researched their counterparts. One final insight before we come back to our conversation. This one around remote and hybrid work. More than half of job seekers with disabilities preferred a hybrid work arrangement compared to just 39% for the general population, and 42% preferred remote work compared to 33% for the general population. Again, that's a lot of data, and you're going to get that in a PDF after the program. How can advisors coach their students with disabilities to find employers and job opportunities that offer the kind of workplace benefits and the workplace cultures they're looking for? What questions should we be teaching job seekers to ask so that they can get this kind of information? Donna, I want to come to you first. What's your advice? What questions should we be teaching people to ask?
Oh, I think that there's a ton of ways people can start really look at the inclusive culture of the company, and therefore that will drive policy and support systems. Great questions are around employee resource groups or ERGs. Do you have one that is focused on the disability community? Other things would be, frankly, look at how they show up. Are they just showing people naturally on their websites and their social media with disabilities? And is it for, GAD and their accessibility statement, or is it in their everyday materials? Are they representing the disability community throughout their brand presence? Obviously, we have our work well-being scores posted on our company pages with Indeed. You can check those out. Work well-being is for everybody, but it usually also indicates there's that inclusive support structure in order for people to have those better scores in that area. More questions can be around accommodations processes. A lot of companies have some things managed by a manager versus other things managed by a third party or another department. So ask maybe specifically about where your accommodations would be managed. And if it's with the manager, talk to that manager about those accommodations. And I suggest sometimes being open-minded, because if you've had a setup in an academic environment, it might be a slightly different setup that will empower you just as effectively in a work environment. So be open to problem solving a bit and getting creative, not to lessen your accommodations or lessen your experience, but to meet them in that setting. Because especially when it's your first role, you might not recognize or have the exposure yet to how those accommodations might be a little bit different. And really, it comes back to just being authentic and being confident that, frankly, you're not asking too much. You're asking exactly what you need to perform the job to the best of your potential. And at the end of the day, your potential is what they're hiring. So they should want to meet you where you are. So go in with that confidence and ask the questions to get your needs met.
And David, you and your team are coaching a lot of students as they're getting ready to take on their internships. And I'm sure you're coaching them on questions that they can ask and questions they should be prepared to ask. What's the typical advice that you're delivering?
Absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Tahani Ratwadi from Indiana University, who's on the call today. We're lucky enough, Tahani is a career consultant with the Ferry Box Center, and she coaches many of our interns, current and recently graduated, to engage in the job search process, to prepare for interviews, to again, be more comfortable with disclosure questions and reading the culture of the workplace. I love what Donna just described there, in comfortable ways. And we think that's really important because, again, those are often questions that the best career consultants don't necessarily have, nor do disability service providers on campuses. Again, as Donna said, in addition to our internship program at the Ferry Box Center, we also do research and we have educational outreach that includes a community practice. And 2 quick points there. Our research has found that learning how to advocate for accommodations as a student in higher education does not always translate to knowing how to self-advocate in the workplace. And a lot of us just sort of assume that it will. So often the best practitioners in higher education aren't thinking, students with disabilities may benefit from additional conversations, workshops, information posted on websites, videos, workshops, often from that graduates from that school with disabilities can come back and do a panel, virtually or in person, and talk about their disability related experiences like Alex is doing today, to help those current students understand more about, well, I've learned how to advocate for myself as a student in an academic setting, but how does that contrast or compare to how that's going to all work out in the workplace setting? So that's one big piece that we do. The other piece, briefly, in our community of practice, what we do, the Ferry Box Center, is we support partnerships between Disability Services Office and Career Services offices. And we really honor and respect the fact that both types of professionals have huge buckets of professionalism and knowledge and experience. But we all know from working in higher education, you're often so busy, your caseloads are so high that it's very easy to get into sort of a silo mentality and not really proactively seek out ways to collaborate. What we're doing in our community of practice model is helping those two offices share expertise with one another so that the career services offices can benefit from some ADA knowledge from the disability services colleagues on their campus about how should I advise a student with a disability in my career services office to think about disclosure issues. Do they self-disclose on an application, for example? Similarly, the Disability Services Office can really learn from the Career Services Office in terms of helping students get internships or their work experience, and how to find those employers who are coming to campus who might be very inclusive and open to meeting students with disabilities at the career fairs. Unfortunately, we know that too many students with disabilities tend not to either use career services or go to career fairs because they often find them inaccessible or not fully prepared to really meet their specific questions or needs. So again, that partnership between the two offices, we think, is fundamental to more inclusive career practices in higher education.
David, I'm giving you 2 old school thumbs up because I'm not using the reaction tool right now, but that kind of collaboration is so, so important. Okay,
And
Alex,
it works.
it works. Okay, Alex, we talk about this stuff. We advise this stuff. You've applied it. You've lived this more recently than the rest of us. What are those questions that your peer students, sure, now you're a graduate and you're working right now, but these emerging talent should be asking so that they can assess opportunities when they're being interviewed?
Yeah, so something that Donna said really struck me, and I think a sign of a company that's going to be a good fit is going to be the fact that they are willing to enthusiastically meet you at a middle ground to make sure that it'll work out. I think that of course, the ERGs, the disability ERGs matter. Of course, the information that they have on the website matters. But I think that what's going to make the biggest impact are the day-to-day interactions and the willingness from the people within the team and the culture that's deeply rooted within the company, how that is going to translate into, as a prospective employee, being part of that culture and that team, and how they are going to collaborate with me in order so that my needs are met. So I think, especially during the interview process, for me, number one was company culture. And you can get a good sense of company culture by asking them about how they collaborate, the relationship between the team, those interactions and how the team interacts and work together. That tells me a lot. And that'll give me confidence to also be open with them, disclosing, hey, I'm going to need this and this. And by their reaction and their willingness to collaborate with me, that's how I can immediately tell if a company is going to be a good fit. Unfortunately, that was my case. Something that I noticed a big contrast from college to the workforce is that now uh, self-advocating is completely my responsibility. And it's going to be easier to self-advocate if I have the confidence and the knowledge that I am fully capable of doing my job just as well or even better than other candidates with the implementation of certain accommodations. And if I can communicate that, and I'm in a team that is willing to collaborate with me and they give me those tools, that is a recipe for success. And I think it's a combination of, first of all, knowing that you do have the skills to succeed and that your disability is uh, not a barrier. And also the fact that there's people that want you to succeed, that people don't want to make it difficult for you. People are also invested in your success. And knowing that has made it easier to self-advocate in the office.
We did a similar program a couple of weeks ago for recruiters, same topic, but for the recruiter audience. And this question of what questions should ask came up. And I mentioned in all of my coaching, I tell students never leave an interview without asking what are the next steps, because you want to know what comes next. But why should they even have to ask that question? Shouldn't that be a standard question that every employer or shares at the end of every interview? And why not? This came out of our conversation. Shouldn't the simple question asked of everyone, are there any accommodations that we can make? Not just asked of individual students. The onus should not always be on the job candidate for that. David, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to share something?
Just something quick and probably obvious to everybody in the audience, but the thing I wanted to mention earlier too is, going through job descriptions and really understanding the essential functions that are being described or not being described or sort of being inferred, but not, explicitly described. That's something too that we spend a lot of time working on with our interns, just so that as they're reading the company culture to the best of their ability and trying to figure out, should I even apply for this job? As earlier Alex said, rely on their team, but also their network even before they apply, to understand not only the culture, but what is it I'm going to have to do on this job? And, vis-a-vis, will that lead to any accommodation need? When you're beginning to get work experience, whether you have a disability or not, reading those components of the job description seem to be key to having the important questions to ask the employer during the interview. When you have a disability, that seems more important than ever, so that you're prepared to answer, am I qualified to do this? And if I need a reasonable accommodation to perform these essential functions, what would those be? But again, a lot of people who don't have a lot of work experience yet don't necessarily know how to unpack a job description in a really helpful way by focusing on those essential functions. So as anybody does in the career world with any future employee, I think that's particularly critical for people with disabilities too, to be taught if they need to know how to understand that part of the job functions.
I wanted to add
Wonderful.
to that real quick, if you don't mind, Matt,
Please dig in. Yeah.
So I think that, David, you're correct. I think a lot of us who have been in this world for a long time, I still have trouble unpacking a duty statement or a job description and figuring out what do they really mean by that word. A lot of our students that we're working with right now are using AI to actually help them unpack that so that they can better understand and find synonyms for words and things like that. But also, one of the things that and to a lot of our students, the first thing they say is the application is not accessible. The number one way that you're going to turn off a student or turn off a potential applicant is if your system is not even accessible. If I use assistive technology, or I can't find on your website how to apply for accommodations, and it's not asked, like Matt said, constantly throughout the process and everything else. So when we work with our corporate partners here at Disability Inn, my number one thing I say is your application accessible? Because if it's not, we won't go into legality about that and everything, but if it's not, then you're actually by default telling people with disabilities don't apply. So we have to see ourselves to want to be there for ourselves as well. So that's just my little 2 cents I wanted to add on to that.
We
To
have
Michelle's
got,
point too, very quickly, man, I just popped the link in the chat. This sort of came up last time too. That can be shared with employers, a guide for them to help make their application process more accessible.
that's tremendous, tremendous stuff. Sometimes as career services professionals, we have to be advocating to the employers who are coming to our campus and helping educate them as well. We're right at the nexus of that. Folks, I don't know if you're paying attention to the questions. We have some great questions coming in, and I want to make sure we're giving enough time because, heck, the 5 of us could talk about this topic all day long, but we want to invite our friends in. We're going to quickly try and get through our third topic because it's an important one, and then jump into questions. And that topic is barriers. 43% of job seekers with disabilities indicated that their disability has acted as a barrier in some way to obtaining the job that they want. But that's not the only barrier that respondents with disabilities reported facing. They were also more likely to experience additional barriers when it came to finding work. First, we looked at identity and situational barriers. Job seekers with disabilities were more likely to report being earlier in their careers, identify as LGBTQA+, not having access to reliable transportation, to be parents without support networks, and or to serve in the military. Each of these barriers can present unique challenges to applying for a new job and succeeding in that role. Now, we also asked the U.S. workforce to identify barriers that are particular to the job search. And these job seekers identified a lot of barriers, and there are some striking differences between workers with disabilities and the general workforce. Both groups rated anxiety or nervousness with the process as the number one barrier, but workers with disabilities rated it 16 points higher than the general workforce. Lack of experience was the number 2 barrier for both, but again, 14 points higher for workers with disabilities. Other key challenges included difficulty with lengthy job search application processes. Michelle kind of called that out already for us, not being able to find postings and not being sure that they have the skills that they need, as well as issues related to resumes and interview challenges. So there's a lot of data for context. I want to, before we jump into questions, sort of close with 2 questions. And David, I'm going to come to you first. Does this list of barriers, is it consistent with what you've seen and or experience? And then what advice do you have for these career advisors on how they can support job seekers facing barriers overcome these barriers and obstacles in their search? So David, I'm going to come to you first. Alex, I'm always going to ask you. And then Donna, I'll ask you to close it out before we get into questions.
Well, just generally, I mean, I think a lot of great suggestions have already come up. Knowledge is power. And again, in general, students, college students with disabilities, unfortunately, for lots of understandable reasons, have historically tended to underutilize career services and higher education, and also to graduate with less work experience than their non-disabled peers. And so again, going back to the idea of knowledge is power, understanding what barriers might exist during the application process, the hiring process, the employment process, anything we can do to proactively help students replace that lack of awareness with accurate knowledge, particularly through experience, is ideal. Learning from peers is really huge. Our experience at the Ferry Box Center is that students really value what their peers have experienced. They also are hungry for role models. They welcome information on websites. They love hearing the experts show up and talk about the ADA and what's required during a disclosure process or not. But I think what they really value most is hearing from peers with disabilities who have gone through this and have passed along their own experience. So again, anything we can do to provide access. Michelle mentioned the Job Accommodation Network, Jan. Yes, absolutely, the go-to resource. Docs with Disabilities is an example of a wonderful program at the University of Michigan that focuses on people going into the medical professions with disabilities. That also has webinars, examples, stories, narratives, blog posts about people with disabilities. So anything we can do either on our campus by bringing current students with disabilities together or former students with disabilities in the workplace or professionals on our campus with disabilities, faculty, administrators, staff, to talk about their own lived experience in the workplace with disabilities. What we tend to find at the Ferry Box Center is that that's incredibly powerful and uplifting. It's not just knowledge, it's that confirmation that this is doable. So I know that's probably a general answer. And Alex, I'd love to hear if you have anything more to add to that. But that's sort of what we find to be a fundamental source of knowledge for the students we work with is get them in touch with their peers so they can compare notes.
And David,
100% agree.
thank you for doing that and transitioning to Alex, because I'm starting to pay attention to the questions that are coming in, so I'll be ready. Alex, take it over.
Yeah, 100% agree, David. As you say, knowledge is power. So knowing how the process works will give him, of course, gives the applicant more confidence. If counselors are able to equip the applicants with knowledge, such as lists of companies that are historically favorable with employees with disabilities, and also, as you said, David, it'd be amazing if counselors could connect applicants with other students and employees such as myself that have gone through the process, because knowing that it can be done and that it can be done successfully removes so much anxiety and nervousness. And it's more likely that I will follow through an application process if I know that it can be done and I can talk to someone that already did it. So I think having those networks or those mentorship relationships are crucial. And if counselors and programs can connect students with people in the workforce with similar lived experience, I think those two things would make a huge difference.
And again, the disability services colleagues on your campus can help those of you in career services with that peer-to-peer networking, right?
Good stuff. I got to thank our colleagues who are working behind the scenes, sending out the links that everyone is talking about here. You're doing wonderful, wonderful work getting this information into the hands of our attendees. But Donna, I would like you to close us out on this topic right now of barriers and advice that you offer in this area.
The first, I always start human first. And if you're in this career services field, helping students with disabilities, you're helping humans who probably by some group in their lives, whether it been in school or social, defined by what they cannot do. That's how they've been defined their whole life. And the challenge you have is to give them the confidence to rewrite that script. These are the skills I have. These are my accomplishments. These are the things I've learned. These are all of the ways my skills and my values and my who I am and what I've built so far are going to do it. And here is my potential going forward. The barriers are going to be there. The nerves are going to be there. There's going to be that fear of what somebody, I always call them their ghosts, of when you disclose, what is somebody else going to associate with that disclosure? There's always going to be that anxiety. But if you can help them stop seeing themselves through that lens and instead embrace the skill sets they have and their passions of what they want to learn in that piece, and to jump into this early career, not as a job or a career and things you're going to do, but experiences you're going to learn from. I am I call it mysteriously neurodivergent. I am a cis female who was being coded learning disabled in the late 80s, early 90s. They had no idea what to do with me. Yeah, Michelle and I bonded over this before. She's like giving up her, praise hands over here. Um, so, those there was all of that, anxiety of, were people going to understand what I'm saying in the way I mean it to be understood? And all of these things early in the career that had somebody said, whoa, hold on, you're not expected to know everything. You're expected to bring these skills and these talents with you, and you're expected to learn and build off of those. I genuinely believe helping people redefine themselves by that and reset that expectation is the most powerful thing you can do at this stage in their career journey.
Donna, that's why I call career coaches first responders.
Yeah.
Because when you're underemployed, you're misunderstood by the workforce, you're in a toxic work relationship of some kind, you're in a state of crisis. And career coaches and career counselors are the first responders to job seekers and students, and in this case, job seekers with disabilities who are in some kind of job search crisis. Super, super important stuff. My brother is stopping by to say hello to our webinar. Thanks, John. Very good. How's that? This is what you get when you're having a workshop live and you're visiting your 94-year-old mother in your hometown at home. So this is good fun. Hey, Michelle, I want to jump us into the questions. And what I'd like to do is start with a question that brought on the topic of applications. This was a question that came in through the chat. I'm going to move more over to the questions that are in the Q&A after this one. But Jill Tobin asked a really simple, direct question. What would an accessible application entail or include? How do we know what we're looking at to know that it's accessible or inaccessible? Perhaps so if we can then advise and talk to an employer or for our own recruiting.
So it depends. So it really is one of those questions of figuring out what assistive technology has access to that application, what assistive technology they might be using. There's some, I'm going to go to Jan again, but again, I love Jan, Job Accommodation Network. They have some really good tools on there for employers on how to make your application accessible, because it's going to be, again, click on a link here and there's no verbiage around what it means or where it goes or how am I going to link to it, or what if I can't see it, or click on the blue link. If you're visually impaired, and you're using a screen reader, is it going to read a blue link or go up to the top right-hand corner? There are so many simple things that if you look at your process and you go, oh, by the way, it's hidden in the bottom and it's white on top of a yellow background and no one's going to see it, that's an issue. It can be very, very simple. When we're working with our corporate partners, the first thing I do, to be very honest, I go apply to jobs on their website. I want to see what the problem is going to be. I'm very kinetic. I'm like Donna, I have ADHD, learning disability. They never knew what to call me. I have the ABCs of disability. I go look in there and going, okay, if I was wanting to ask a question, how would I do that? What systems do they have in place? How do I ask for an accommodation? Is it buried in the document or buried in the application? Those are all things that we do as a disability, but also when you go to other programs, and we should be doing this as career counselors anyway, because I do career counseling. How do you find solutions to that? And how do you address it? I want to actually ask one of the questions somebody brought up in here real quick. They're asking
Please.
about how people might identify themselves. I was taught disability first. I want to address that. It has changed. And I'm so glad it has, because you'll hear Donna and I both say we're neurodiverse or we're disabled. We have no problem. In fact, I don't have it on today, but I usually have disability pride shirt on, and things like that. So you're finding our youth who are coming out of college do not say I'm a person with a disability. They say I'm disabled, I'm autistic, I am blind, I am deaf. And then they have, and that intersectionality as well is very big for them. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you're thinking is building that community around that person in their community, their intersectionality of their community. But I wanted to hit that one about self-identification, because it's big with our students. And we've seen the shift in the last 5 to 6 years away from person first into disability language and pride about their disability. So I just wanted to hit that one too while I was at it.
And I've got to give disability in some props here. I am fortunate for the first time this year, a disability in mentor. And the training that you all provide for your mentors is some of the best training I've experienced. And I would encourage any career coach or career counselor to take advantage of that training or get involved in that program, because I have learned so many things that help me be a better mentor and help me be a better career coach as we go
Thank
along.
you.
Alex, we've got a question here that's really directed at you, so I'm going to come to it first. It's from a Daniel. Daniel asks, as a career coach, I help students identify ways of requesting workplace accommodations is different than the process of requesting for academic accommodations. Daniel would appreciate your perspective, Alex, and the rest of us here on how these processes differ, the difference between asking for academic accommodations and work accommodations, where they're different or where they're similar. Alex, what's your experience? And then, of course, David, Michelle, Don, I'd come to you.
Yeah, so they have some similarities and some differences. I'll quickly run through my experience with both. So for college, I first have to reach out to the accessibility office, and I have to do a formal request with them. And then I have to speak with professors and tell them what I need, extra time in exams, digital materials, etc. And once I get the consent of my professors, the accessibility office sends them a letter with my official requests, and usually that's it. That's how the process went for college. In my experience, it was pretty seamless. I think the biggest thing in the workplace is that in college I feel like there's a set list of accommodations. Of course, people are going to be able and willing to work with you, but I feel like in the office you need to be they don't have a set list, and you need to be clear in what you need, and you need to be assertive, especially if some of the things that you require might be a special software or large monitors, that could entail a purchase for the company, and you just have to be uh, in my company has a thankfully they have a team that manages this, but it's on me to reach out to them and work with them and be clear and letting them know what I need. And usually people in HR have been super helpful. But I think the biggest difference is that in the workplace, it's of course it's always a responsibility of the student and the employee, but I feel like it's even more so in when you're in the workplace. You need to be clear with what you need, because people don't know what you need except you. You need to be clear in that regard, and HR will be more than happy to work out with you. That's been my experience.
Wonderful advice. Does anyone have anything to share or add on? Because I think Alex covered it pretty carefully. Okay. So, folks, we had a number of questions, and I'm just going to paraphrase that came in about how to make our worlds that we invite students into more accessible, whether it's how do you make a career fair accessible, more accessible to students with disabilities, our office space, the software and the tools that we use. So, Donna, can I start with you on this one, on this notion of making things accessible? Because frankly, that's what you're in charge of in our world here at Indeed. But then also, David and Michelle, particularly in the Career Center environment, what advice can we offer on how to make the world of the Career Center and services more accessible? Donna?
The first thing you should always do is, and I think it's come up before here, is just always ask everybody, regardless, what are your access needs? And that's going to cover not only your full range of disability, whether it's self-diagnosed or formally diagnosed, but it's also going to accommodate, you know, maybe you have a new parent or something along those lines. There's a lot of different things. So it's a very universal and inclusive and belonging building space to just start right there with that. And then as you learn, keep adapting. The best rule of thumb for any management of working with people with disabilities is that if somebody says something isn't working, you believe them first. You don't question that. You might have questions about the process so that you know how to address it, but just believe them and really take on a very iterative approach to all of this. You realize that, oh my gosh, we have people coming with service animals to our events, but there's no water bowls, there's no designated relief area. It's such a small thing to put out a $2 water bowl and, say, give clear instructions to where there is a piece of lawn. But that can make a difference in the right circumstance. So as you notice, as you become aware, and then if you have people, it's now acknowledging it is not their responsibility. But if you have people, whether they be on your staff or students, who want to volunteer their time and donate their time to you to say, look, I can walk through this process with you and tell you what I perceive. That's always nice, but again, it's never their responsibility. And that is why, indeed, as Matt points out, has me for so many different things. Because you're going to need that, and you're going to need the chorus of people over time. So just be open to really adapting as you go.
David or Michelle, thoughts on this topic of making career services more accessible or making sure they're accessible?
Michelle, go.
So I'm all about accessibility, both physical and pragmatic and virtual and everything else. There are so many tools out there that you can use that are again at Gen accommodation. There's other websites as well that you can actually just sort of look at your site. One of the first things I always do when I'm trying to put together a physical event is, where are the doorways? Do not block the doorways. Is there enough path for people with disabilities in a wheelchair or a scooter or however? Are there stairs? Are there elevators? Those things like that are people most think about. But also, I heard somebody saying the thing about a quiet room, a place for people to go if they're overwhelmed. And there's no space for that. Sometimes I've done hallways. I've done stairwells where people can go and just get that quiet moment because they need to gather. Because job fairs and things are a lot of noise. They used to be. Now after COVID, I think they're a little bit quieter. But do you have a virtual opportunity? Because a lot of people do better virtually, and they can actually go in and out and we do a virtual matchmaking meet and greet with our corporate partners with our students, and they go from room to room and they get to meet 5 different people and have 15-minute conversations with individuals. And we have ASL and we have CART, and everybody has the ability to present their best self. I heard somebody also talking about somebody that might have a speech disorder, or they might have word finding issues like I run into quite often lately. It's again asking, what can I do? My biggest thing I talk about in our community is nothing about me without me, and ask me. Ask the student, ask the individual, what can I do to accommodate you? What can I do to make this experience accessible to you? And that's the biggest thing that we do here. We do is ask that question, because we know our disabilities. Donna and I, we might have the same ones, but we have different ways to accommodate ourselves. But if you ask us, we know we can tell you how we need to be assisted.
And real quick, if I could just one second, and assume you're going to get it wrong.
Yes.
Assume you're going to be wrong, and don't get caught up in it. You're going to say something wrong. You're going to do something wrong. Nobody gets it right. There's over, 1 billion people with disabilities, and everyone is unique. you're going to get it wrong, and that's okay as long as you learn and keep adapting. I'm sorry, David. Thank you for letting me jump in.
Oh,
Yeah, and I have to put it on you because that's what we've been doing for some reason. I've learned I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I learned something new every single week.
absolutely.
Every single time my interaction with a person with a disability, it is a life learning process. So yeah, you're going to get it wrong. Just live it and say, my bad, and learn from it.
A lot of us, when we want to help, when we
Yes.
become sensitive to better understanding the needs of students with disabilities, sometimes we go to this place of, oh, then the best way I can help is to show up with the answer. I need to do all the research and be the expert and show up and have the solution. So, as Don and Michelle are saying, couldn't agree more. Ask the experts, ask people with disabilities, do an informal survey, do an evaluation after a career event or some other career fair and get your feedback on, what were the accessibility issues? Do you have any suggestions for making it more accessible? I'll just add quickly, I also popped the URL to an article that was in a special issue in last fall's Journal of Post-Secondary Education and Disability. It's the journal from AHEAD, the Association of Higher Ed and Disability. And the link that I included was the article about the community of practice that we fostered. So if anybody wants to take time to read through that article, first of all, it will put you in that special issue with other information. But that article talks about how career services and disability services have partnered together so that the career experiences and events on a given campus are more accessible to people with disabilities.
Okay, friends, I could tell you we're going to go a little bit long, but don't worry, this recording is going to be available. We're going to close, and I'm going to ask you each for a hot take around a specific topic. There's also some questions in there about, before I jump into that, about the mentorship program that I was talking about. That's with Disability In, and the links are being dropped in the chat. So this chat is a treasure trove of information, okay? So here we go, folks. To close out the Q&A session here and bring us to a close, your hot take on this question from Tammy. Tammy says she'd like some insider experience using the word disability in a different way when we share or communicate, that everyone has unique abilities and strengths, trying to find a creative approach that destigmatizes the word disability in a positive way. People walk around on eggshells because we don't necessarily know how to talk about the topic and don't want to offend. Hot take on how we have this conversation and how we normalize it, destigmatize it. David, your hand's up. Get us going with your hot take.
Given the audience, I'm sure most people on this call are familiar with NACE's career competencies. I would start there and link that very easily to the lived experiences of many people with disabilities. Critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, thinking outside the box, being adaptive, resourceful, persistent. There is so many attributes that any employee with any employee might benefit from having that adds to their success in workplace culture. If you're working with somebody with a disability, that might be where you bring up the superpower conversation with the student you're working with and help them, if they haven't yet themselves, know how to talk about their disability in a very positive way, like we heard Michelle and Donna and Alex do today, but link those lived experiences, whether it's resilience, critical thinking, thinking outside the box, to those career competencies that NACE has researched, and help that candidate learn how to talk about what they have gained from their disabled experience in a way that lines up with what research says helps anybody the attributes anybody needs in the workplace to be successful. So that would be my takeaway.
Wonderful. Donna, I want to come to you next. What's your hot take?
Well, my first thing is just say disability. It's not a bad word. It's just any other. I am female. I grew up rural. I grew up poor. I had a mobility barrier for 8+ years. I am mysteriously neurodivergent. These are all social identities, and it's fine. So my first thing is just say the word. The second thing is that going back to that empowering people, right along with what David's saying, though, is getting them to be like, yep, cool, disabled, yeah, female, cool, yeah. So here are my skills. And change that conversation to be about strengths, and don't let anyone define you by the thing you can't do great, or else you'd all know about my chocolate chip cookie failures. Just saying.
Very good. Michelle, let me come to you next. What's your hot take?
So my hot take is Donna, I burn bacon. That's mine. I have, so I'm a bacon. I work for a company
Oh,
called
I might have
Disability.
issues now. I might have
Disability
issues
N.
now if
I
you're
work,
messing with bacon.
yeah, I'm Southern, but disability, we say it. We say it proudly. We say it out, but not, and a lot of our students are learning now that that's not a bad word. It is part of my identity. I'm like Donna. I'm a female. I happen to have three young. I said middle, well, children. I'm not gonna say how old they are because that's gonna give away my age. But and they are like, we're disabled. We're not disabled. One's a lawyer. She is a disability in that way. So don't whisper it. Say it out loud. It's okay to say it out loud. I like, because somebody says, don't whisper about it, talk about it. Yes, talk about it because it's part of who we are. And if we're uncomfortable talking about it, our students are going to be uncomfortable talking about it. The partner is going to be uncomfortable talking about it. And everybody's going to continue to keep it behind the curtain instead of in front of everybody and where it needs to be.
Alex, you're on some levels the most important person on this call because you're the person that we work with and that everyone on this webinar works with on a day in, day out basis. What's your hot take for folks today?
Wow. First of all, I think Donna, Michelle, and David, what they said is absolutely true, and it's very close to what I wanted to say. Um, let's not beat around the bush when it comes to talking about disability. As let's not whisper about it. Oh yeah, like this coworker has a disability, or oh I heard. It's another topic that we should embrace with normality. Let's not make it taboo. And my hot take is that in order to accelerate this change, I think the responsibility falls on us, the people with disabilities. We need to feel confident about it. We need to feel confident in our identity, in who we are. We need to start these conversations with other people. We have to make it normal. We have to make people feel at ease with conversations like this, make them know that it's part of day-to-day conversation and that, of course, it's part of our identity, but it's not the sole thing that defines us. We have to start having these conversations, create awareness, and make people realize that disability is indeed not a bad word. It's just another factor of our identity. All of our identities are very beautiful. Disability is another factor, and let's embrace it and let's talk about it and let's make it a strength.
As we come to a close, I have 3 words. 3 words that I think we should all use to approach this. Confidence. Be confident in who you are and be ready to tell your story and coach students to do that. Curious. Be curious to know and understand the world and the people around you and to understand the perspectives that they have. And humility. Be humble to understand that we don't have all of the answers. And we're on the journey sometimes with the individuals that we're coaching. So confident, curious, humility is a great way to approach, I think, this and any topic in coaching students. And friends, I think that's a good topic for us to close out our conversation today. What a great Friday conversation. It has been wonderful fun. David, Michelle, Donna, and Alex, great insights. I could talk with you all day long about this or pretty much any other topic, I think. I'd like to thank our partners at Partners Interpreting, our friends there, for their service throughout the course of this webinar. And I'd like to thank NACE straight up for being an advocate for our emerging workforce and everyone in our emerging workforce and giving folks like Indeed and Eskenazi Health and Disability and the opportunity to bring this message to you all. And I would like to thank you for making the recruitment of talented and motivated students with disabilities a priority for your organization, your campus, or whoever you are. Now, you can learn more about the internship program for students with physical disabilities at the Gregory S. Ferrybox Center for Eskenazi Health. They were the winner, as I mentioned, of the 2024 NACE Chevron Award for Innovation in Student Programming. I know that URL has been dropped in the chat, but maybe it's a good time to drop it in the chat again. And you can learn more about Indeed's efforts to help 30 million job seekers facing barriers get jobs by 2030 by going to the link that Bridget will be sharing here shortly. Thank you again. Have a wonderful Friday. Have a great weekend. Let's do this again soon. And if I don't see you beforehand, I hope I see you at the NACE conference. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.